Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad project. I'm Rob Kalwarowski, and the yang to my yin is here, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I'm so fired up and excited to be here. We have a guest that we have been dying to get in studio and on this mic, and she showed up in her yellow for us today. So I know she's going to bring the joy to our audience. How are you feeling, sir?
Oh, I'm great. Was up, did a little workout. Now I'm here enjoying the beautiful, obviously for folks who are on audio, I have the beautiful forest behind me, and it's a real background, not a Zoom one.
Yeah, that's the popular question in our locker rooms all week, isn't it?
That's right. And so obviously we have to start the show with a quote. So I have one here from Robert Schuller, and he says, "What would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail?"
Ooh, I love that quote. And I love that man. I remember waking up on Sundays watching the Hour of Power. He was my dad's favorite pastor back in the day.
And yeah,
that's why you picked this one.
Well, with our quote, we have our incredible special guest, Solange Tuyishime is joining us. She's the CEO of Elevate International. She's a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. She's Mrs. Canada. She's runner-up at Miss World. And coming up this summer, she's going to be hitting Miss Universe. So this is incredible. Solange, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm like, I don't know about that intro. I'm like, should I have had at least a little bit of makeup on to try and look something that looks like a Miss Universe? But I mean, it's a new era, right? Women are leading in the most authentic way. So there's no better way to actually talk about pageantry and my journey in the greatest shape or form. No makeup, just glasses and a cup of coffee.
Amen. Sister preach.
And Solange, I picked this quote for you, and I'd love your take on what do you think about the quote?
It's funny when you read it on what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? I'm like, do we have a novel for this? Because I have a whole list of things. I don't think I've ever been short of what can be done and what can be accomplished. I actually think my mind is always wondering in so many areas. How do we make the world better? How do we make people happy? How do we make people feel loved? How do we create prosperity for everyone? So I think when I'm always asking myself those questions, there's a million possibility of what we could do and how we could do it. And then it's a fear that kicks in, right? So when you read that quote, it was like, yeah, if there was no fear, imagine all these things we could do. But we would need like 48 hours in a day, not 24.
Yeah, definitely that part. I'm curious, Solange, have you always been this possibility thinker? And tell us a little bit about when you first started about thinking about the possibilities of Miss Universe and pageantry, and how did you even get on that aspect of your mission?
Well, I think, yes, I've always been dreaming. I can't remember I can't remember a time in my life where I wasn't a dreamer, even as a kid. And, that whole thing of what do you want to be when you grow up? I always had a million things, but I think it became really defining for me after the war and genocide when I was a refugee, just watching yourself as a little girl having less than all the many little girls you see, and you're kind of wondering, what do I do with all these big dreams that are happening in my head, but then I don't have anything. Like when you're sleeping in a tent with two dresses, it's kind of hard to tell someone I have this big dream of doing X, Y, and Z. But I think in that moment, I really made a promise to myself that if I survived, I would do something meaningful with my life, and it would be aligned with making the world a better place. Because I At 11 years old, you clearly see the haves and have-nots. You clearly see what real fear looks like when your life is in danger. And you see on the missed opportunities. So I knew that for me, if I was lucky enough to survive, I would dedicate my life to making the world a better place. So I think for me, this big thinker has always been me answering Miss Solange, which is the 11-year-old girl who made that promise. So every time I have an idea, a thought, an opportunity, and I'm a little bit worried. I'm like, should I? I remember the 11-year-old girl who said, yes, if you survive, you will do it all. Yes, if you have an incredible idea that's going to make people feel better or enhance anybody's life, you're going to say yes to it. So a lot of my yeses are to my little Miss Solange in here, who just made that commitment. And pageantry was the same. I was invited to pageantry very late in my life, late in the pageant world. As we know, in the women's world, not late at all. I was only 21. But for those who have done any type of modeling or pageantry in their young age, I'm a very late bloomer coming in. And I said no. I said, thank you for the invites, but I will not be participating, because someone had discovered me at a gala when we were hosting something. At the time, I was vice president of the African Student Union at the university, and they discovered me. And when the invitation came, I thought it was a prank first for my friends. And I said, listen, the show was over Saturday. It's wonderful. Like, I'll see you guys Monday. And I hung up. And then they call again and say, this Solange, we would love to invite you to participate at a pageant. I said, guys, like, it was funny, but not funny. And then an email followed up, and it was an official email. And I was like, oh my gosh, sir, I am really sorry. I am normally more polite than this. I thought it was my friends playing a prank. And then I said, but I will have to decline. I've never participated in pageantry. I don't even know where I would start. And also, like, a part of me was thinking, I am a young immigrant, refugee who just, like, fresh in Canada. It hasn't been like too long. Who am I to be participating in a pageant? And I don't have the means to wear the beautiful gowns and to find those and all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of it was more no than yes. And 5 days before, I was like, I think the 11-year-old will kind of want to do this. I was like, okay, we're doing it. And I told my parents, like, very last minute, I'm like, so Mom and Dad, you're going to drive me to this place because there's a pageant. And they're sitting on the couch. They look at each other. They're like, is this another thing? They let it be. And then, like, 2 days before, they see me packing. I had gone to Walmart. I bought a dress from Walmart and shoes from Walmart and, like, white people nylons, because I didn't know they made them in color. We lived in New Brunswick. Come on. Like, we did not have colored nylons. The whole kit. And then they drove me. And I went and I had a great time. It was my opportunity to start traveling and meeting other people. And when they called top 10, top 5, top 3, and I'm like, how am I still into this? And then I answered my question for top 3 in the pageant, and everybody went quiet. In my mind, I'm like, holy moly, I messed this one up. Like, this is not good. And I'm like, how do I get people to just not be silent? And then people's tears start rolling. And I'm like, oh, they saw me. Like, that's the first thing I saw. I didn't think, I got their emotion. The first thing I thought, as a young woman who had felt unseen for so long as a refugee, was like, oh, they saw me. And that was it. It was a platform for me where I felt like I was seen. I was using my natural gift of connecting with people through my words and storytelling. And I was inspiring them to make the world better. In a beautiful gown. Well, at the time, it was a Walmart gown. But we're just going to call it beautiful because that was what I had.
You were rocking it.
In my mind, it was amazing. So that was pageantry for me.
It's such an amazing story, and it shows you something, right? Is it's not about the gown, it's about you.
Mm.
I know that this aspect of your story that you just went through in terms of the imposter syndrome is one that my female listeners are resonating with for damn sure. I know this because I'm resonating so hard with this. This was totally my experience coming up in my sport. And when I was this little blue collar kid in Mississauga who made it to these fancy Ivy League school when nobody in my family went to university. And I had the exact same experience that you described. I'm curious what you would say to all of my females out there that are still struggling with that imposter syndrome. What would your advice be to them?
You know, it's interesting. First of all, I don't think I really think about imposter syndrome much, because I've come to realize that it's not my problem to own. So why do we feel the imposter syndrome, right? So like if I had to think about it, it's because somewhere, somehow, very long time ago, someone made you feel like you did not belong in this space.
Mm-hmm.
You can't create that you don't belong in any space. Because if you think about it as children, when children start walking or crawling, they go everywhere. We all do that. Mm-hmm. They walk everywhere. You go to the park, they see another kid. It's hi, it's can we play? It's amazing. Because we know that this space, this world belongs to all of us, and it should be beautiful. And we should just all exist and be whatever we want to be. As we grow up, it starts being, well, girls can't do this, or boys shouldn't wear this. Boys can't cry. Women can't be too bossy. Like then there start these social rules that are putting us in a box, containing our wings, and we can't fly as we should. Mm-hmm. So for me, every time that I felt a little shaky, I've had to tap into a few things. One, is it my trauma that's talking about just when you go through really challenging circumstances and your heart and your mind are afraid of happiness? And then I have to remind, it's okay. You're allowed to be happy and you're allowed to thrive. Or two, am I in an environment where someone once made me feel less than? And I have to take that back and give it right back. Like I literally just give it right back. And I have to remind myself, if I'm here and if I'm sitting here, is because I'm meant to be here and I deserve to be here. And I'm here for a specific reason and a purpose, and my voice and my skills will be heard and used. And I constantly tell myself that all the time, whether it's pageantry, whether it's in a boardroom, whether it's in like a group of people. I genuinely never believe that you're there just by accident. You're always there for a reason. Either it's someone you're going to connect with, either it's someone you're going to elevate, either it's an idea you're going to provide that will help shape the lives of many. There's always a specific reason. So this whole imposter syndrome, I kind of like gave it back to whoever was trying to make us feel that we didn't belong anywhere. This world is equally ours as anybody else's. Yes, sometimes there are tactics that are played that hurt us. That's why we create safe spaces. But imposter syndrome, nah. If you're sitting in that seat, it's because you deserve it.
Woo! Mic drop on that. Give it right back. Give those beliefs right back to society and leave them to society to figure out, because we're not buying it anymore. We're not buying into those beliefs that society tried to condition in us. I love that answer.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to control a group of people who act and think the same way, because you can continue manipulating that. That's so much easier. Mm-hmm. But if we all believe in our freedom of existence and then it's kind of hard to like control exactly how you should think, function, and do to benefit only the few minority. Because then in that moment, we're all benefiting, we're all sharing, we're all equal. So to the few selfish ones, it doesn't work. To the rest of us, it works really well.
Solange, like, of course, you do so many amazing things. What mission are you on?
I would definitely say a human-centered mission. The idea that we should create a world where everyone thrives. I think we talk about people surviving all the time, but there's survival and then there's thriving, where everybody has the opportunity to dream bigger, to just pour their purpose into this world and to genuinely deliver what they were created for. I think I've always been really attached to, I think human suffering affects me the most because I know what it's like, and those images come vividly all the time in my head. So I've always believed that if we create leaders who are human-centered, then we're creating a better world. And for the longest time, I used to tell people, what is your purpose? And I said, to make this world a better place, until I realized that everybody uses that line, but it doesn't carry the same meaning. Make the world a better place, make it the world, but what does that mean in reality? And how do you put accountability measures to it? And for me, it was, if we inspire and we elevate more human-centered leaders, they will care about people. They will care about the decisions they make in their organizations or corporations or in their society. They will take care of the people who work with them and for them. And that comes from our mental health to just our ability to advance. And they will think profoundly about the corporate social responsibility they take on and how they take them on. So everything comes back to, as a human being, how am I serving this wonderful planet and the universe of ours that allows each and everyone to live a happy life that is just prosperous and joyful? So it's like, let's create more human-centered leaders.
I love that answer. Where do we begin, Solange? Let's talk to this crowd full of leaders right now that are obviously tuning into this heart-centric, human-centric leadership podcast right now, because they happen to agree this is when the world needs us on our missions more than ever. So where does that begin? Let's give our audience a little bit of inspiration from you in terms of where our human-centric leaders really need to step up and play their biggest impact game right now in this world.
I mean, it all starts within. And I think everybody knows this. It starts within. We have so many proverbs that every culture has those proverbs of what starts within pours out on externally in a beautiful way. And for me, like, for example, so I'll talk about my journey. I'll probably say, as someone who has survived a war, a genocide, and who had triplets, who had gone through the loss of a child, who has had a journey of many, many challenging moments. And I'll probably say the loss of a child is the worst thing that can happen to a human in so many ways. I think even in that moment, I remember the next day thinking, I would never wish this. I would never wish this upon my worst enemy, like the person that I dislike the most. Even them, I would never want them to go through that. But it wasn't until that journey, until that chapter, that I realized that I had been in survival mode, like since age 11. But now I'm 30. And I'm going through the loss of a child. And at the time, I thought I was going to therapy to figure out how I live with this kind of grief and pain. But I went to therapy, and we're doing therapy and MDR and everything else. And I realized there are so many other wounds. What does that look like when you wake up and you're an 11-year-old and there's gunfire and there's grenades and there are bombs and there, like, all of that came right in here. So I think looking within, well, one, I was fortunate that I was wired that every challenging circumstance in my life, I had always used it to better the lives of others. but not all of us are wired that way. But I also realized that when I started healing those wounds, it made me such a better leader, such a better advocate. I knew that I was already committed to making this world a better place. But in that moment, it made me such a confident leader because every time decisions were made, or I knew that I wanted to make sure that those decisions are good for the people. And I was confident in my decisions, regardless of whether someone was more powerful than me. I was okay making that decision and maybe walking away with no money than with a ton of money that was going to hurt people. I was such a much, much, much better leader because I had healed myself and I understood my journey. It made me sink more into the leader that I am. So I always tell people, look within, which 3 years ago or 4 years ago, if you would have told people look within, they would have thought like, okay, what is this mambo jumbo that you're trying to
Yeah.
right? People looked at you sideways like, right? We looked at leadership training and development as this thing of like, here the proper strategy that you should follow and you execute this and you check this line and right. But there was nowhere like, how do you feel as a leader? How do you take care of yourself? What are your heck no's that turn into heck yes to myself that end up making you a much more enjoyable human being, that make you reflect on the decisions you make, how they affect people, the environment, the community. Because you can only think about others when you've thought about yourself. So like my greatest quote that I live by all the time is that you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, ever. So like this person, like take care of that person, like wholeheartedly. And ask that person as a leader, don't think about like, oh, I have 500 emails today. We all have 500 emails. And guess what? People will be fine. And they can wait 5 minutes or a day if you need to take care of yourself. So I think for me to be a human-centered leader, you need to like start with yourself. Are you genuinely loving the human being that you are? And then I always take it a step further. Are you huggable? Like, can you give yourself a hug and be like, I like this woman. I like this human. Because I hug myself often and I'm like, I love you, Solange. But like 10 years ago, I don't think I would have had that conversation with myself. And I don't say this to myself to say, I love you, Solange, because I think I'm perfect. It's because I know that I'm doing the best to the best of my knowledge. And I have to be at peace with that. And those around me recognize that. And you start attracting people who are kind to you because they're kind to themselves. And you start being kind to others because you're kind to yourself. So it starts with self, everything.
What I love about that answer is we've heard that once or twice on the podcast, right? That leadership starts with self, but I don't think we ever hear that it starts with healing. Oh. And that's something that I feel like we really got to riff on, right? Because how often are leaders afraid to do that deeper work, right? They want to work on their growth. They want to work on their impact. They want to work on their future goals, right? But yeah, I think everything that you laid out there is so profound, right? Because it really makes the case for how we even step into human-centric leadership. How do you step into that if you're not seeing yourself as a human first? That has some pain, right? That needs to be reconciled.
Yeah, and you know, and sometimes you've had people who have been going through significant challenges in their lives, and it doesn't have to be like a war and genocide. Come on. Like, seriously, I don't wish that upon people. And I'm profoundly praying for those that are going through it. However, we've all gone through things that have shaken us up a little bit. And when we don't address them, it's this wound that just stays dormant. And you don't know what's gonna like hit in that wound and just they take things the wrong way. And when we are in pain, we tend to hurt others.
That's right.
And we tend to hurt ourselves even more.
Mm-hmm.
So to avoid all that, to avoid continuing to hurting ourselves and those around us, we heal our wounds. And I think it comes from the way we've designed leadership and the recognition of the leadership. It always comes down to, well, who brought the most money in the company? Like, give us the numbers, right? It's these things that have no feelings. What's the number? And then that's where, if you think about culture, we talk about the end justifies the means.
Mm-hmm.
It's not personal. It's business. It is personal. I gave you 8 hours of my day.
That's right.
And I'm going to see my kids for like maybe 3 hours before they go to bed. It's very personal. So you better treat me well,
Mm-hmm.
because it's extremely personal.
Mm-hmm.
The end justifies the means. No, it doesn't. Because I always tell people it's a ripple effect. If I come in as a leader and I was unkind to you that day, I put some pain towards you. You go home, your significant other might say something, and then you will be unkind to them. Your child might say something, mommy, well, and then your brain is not there. They might go to bed thinking, I wonder why my mom wasn't focused on my little art project today. Does she love? You understand? So I always tell people, you being an a-hole really creates a hole in many people's lives. So like, if we heal our wounds, if we talk about those things, then you are healing more people and giving other people permission to exist with their wounds and everything else that come in between. And this idea where we celebrated leadership because you have it all together makes no sense at all, like at all.
Mm-mm.
I think leadership should be celebrated for how your team advances, how your organization creates impact.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, of course, you're supposed to stay afloat. Nobody wants to go like, bankrupt or an unsuccessful business. But if you do it in a way that is elevating others, then it means that your success will be long-term, because then people are saying, I would love my kids to work here one day because I was treated well. It's a silent recruitment that you don't even need to like pour money into, because you treated people so well. Now they want to stay. And then when you treat someone well, they will give you more hours of their day. If you say, Rob, I really need an extra 5 minutes today because the situation we're going to, no problem, Solange. I got you. Because they know that if Rob comes back, if he knows he comes back another day and say, today, I'm not feeling it. Say, take a mental health day. That is like such a valuable exchange that we do as human beings that you don't get when you lead the other way. So when we heal our wounds, we lead from a trusted space versus the fear-based, all these automatic things that we can't measure.
Yeah.
So amazing. Solange, we got to ask you our big question. What do you want your legacy to be?
Such a heavy question.
That's our big gun.
I want to be remembered as someone who genuinely inspired leaders to create change for all people, like all people. And when I say all people, for me, it's the images of a little girl who's somewhere in the middle of nowhere, who has no access to education but has big dreams, equally as a family man who's wondering, how am I going to feed my family tomorrow? To gender diverse people who are figuring out, where do I belong in this world? Like, I want to be the person that inspired leaders to always take a step back and think, how am I serving humanity? Then I feel like my work would have been done because it's easy for me. I see these people vividly. I hear their voices, their sound, their cries, their laughters. Those are things that come natural to me. I don't think it's natural for every person. So while I'm gifted with this thing that can be heavy sometimes, sharing it, if it inspires more leaders to create this beautiful village of heart-centered leadership that's going to create change for millions of people, then yeah, it's a good life.
Amazing. Solange, can you tell the folks out there how they can support you on your journey to Miss Universe?
I love that we've already gone like directly to Miss Universe. Um, hmm. It's interesting because I felt like I had an answer before that was just an automatic answer. But I keep getting this thing, and it stayed with me the last year, is I want to be a queen for the people. And it stays in my head all the time. So I think supporting me is one, share with me some of the most incredible leaders that are doing amazing things that I can shine their light and the change that they're making in this world. And through this journey, while I have this platform to really shine light on these leaders, send me those names. I want to highlight them. I want to share their stories. I want to share the stories of their communities. If you're a sponsor and you want to be on this journey with me of shining light on incredible leaders in this world who are shaping a beautiful universe, please come and sponsor. This journey is yes, requires my time, my effort, and my voice. And as we know, nothing in this world comes for free. So we have to create this beautiful platform. And by creating it, I will need a lot of sponsors, a lot of voices, a lot of beautiful organizations that are committed to shining more light on human-centered people.
Amazing. And for folks out there, if you want to find Solange, you can go to misssolange.com. You can also follow her on Instagram, Miss Solange, on LinkedIn, Miss Solange as well, and elevateinternationalorg.com. So you can find her in all those places. They're in the podcast notes, so you don't have to remember them. Obviously, for us, if you're looking for one-on-one executive coaching or leadership development programs, head on over to elitehighperformance.com and hit subscribe to the Leadership Launchpad project on your favorite podcast platform. Susan, where do you want to leave our listeners with this week?
I love that you came in today and totally made this case, connecting all these dots all the way back to healing. That really is where the human-centric leadership begins, because hurt people hurt people. So if you are resonating with this message and you got something that is feeling like it needs a little healing or reconciliation, then let this be your call, because that really is how we're able to fully accept ourselves, step into our authenticity, take back our power, give back those limited beliefs, right? Like that really is where playing your biggest impact game when the world needs it more than ever surely begins for us all as leaders, carrying all this weight in the models that we set, right? When we're on our missions every single day. So I just love this conversation and this inspiration for all of us to really think twice about, the healing aspects of our leadership journey.
Yeah, I love it.
So good.
Yeah, and for me, I just want to land the plane in a similar place. Is leadership starts with self, but then as you heal, that's when you can grow that community and make that impact grow bigger, farther, and wider. And that's really what Solange has demonstrated. And I think for folks out there, like, totally follow Solange on Instagram. And I mean, I know a lot of you who are listening are amazing human-centric leaders. So definitely hit her up and get in there, support her, and you might be able to get showcased in the process. Solange, it's so amazing to have you in here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Wishing a wonderful journey to every leader that is listening, because I think if they're listening, they were meant to hear this message today. And may you always know that you're not alone and that everything you do creates a better world for the people around you.
Amazing. Couldn't have said it better. Everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.